this generation was summoned to the parade ground and told to train for war. That is what Tom Brokaw indicated in his book, The Greatest Generation. They left ranches in South Dakota, their jobs on Main Street in Georgia. They gave up their place on the assembly lines in Detroit and the ranks of Wall Street. They quit school and went from cap and gown directly into uniform. They faced great odds and a late start, but they did not protest. At a time when their lives, days and nights, should have been filled with innocent adventure and love and lessons of the war-day world, they were fighting, often hand to hand, in the most primitive conditions possible, across the bloody landscape of France and Belgium and Italy and Austria. They fought their way up a necklace of South Pacific islands few had ever heard of before. They were in the air every day in skies filled with terror, and they went to sea on hostile waters far removed from their shores. They were mature beyond their years, tempered by what they had been through, disciplined by their training and their sacrifices. They married in record numbers, gave birth to another distinguished generation of the baby boomers, and they stayed true to their values of personal responsibility, their duty, their honor, and their faith. Our annual Veterans Day, this is their 11th Veterans Day, is just a small way to pay tribute to those men and women who've given their lives. I was just wanting to, on a personal basis, kind of dedicate, my students have seen this gentleman. He never could make it. His wife spoke to me this year. His name was Peter Montalvo. And Peter Montalvo was on the USS Yorktown. And he had a great deal of sacrifice and kept up with every member of his group on the Yorktown through all of his life. And so I'd like to dedicate that. This also came in honor of Veterans Day. It says, freedom has always been worth fighting for, and I think these gentlemen certainly understand and appreciate that. I'm going to introduce each speaker one at a time and let them speak. I've asked each of our distinguished gentlemen to talk to them about, focused on one or two events or experiences they had in the war, because I know that all these wonderful young men and women that had their World War II test yesterday, so they're very versed in asking you a lot of questions after you speak. Mr. Herman Harrington was a member of the United States Army, 69th Infantry. He saw combat in Belgium and Germany, including what you all now know was Hitler's last offensive war, the Battle of the Bulge. Mr. Harrington, 69th, was the first troops to link up with the Russian troops as they began occupying Germany. Today, as an active member of the American Legion, Mr. Harrington has spent a great deal of time and energy to ensure a dream that now has come true, and that is the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C. Something that you now can see that can come true. Mr. Harrington.
Thank you very much. I've been asked to focus my remarks on one particular event in World War II, and it seems that I don't have any. Not one particular event that's that important. I went in the Army, I was only 18 years old, right out of high school, and quickly moved on in my adventures, and wound up with the 69th Infantry Division as a demolition man. And that's not a good job to have, but that was my job. We blew German pillboxes and things of that, German 88s when we could find the time. But the one event that sort of hinges in my mind is when we made the link up with the Russians. We were concerned, and shortly before that, President Roosevelt died, and I was somewhat alarmed over that. Their commander-in-chief had just passed away. He'd done a wonderful job of getting us along this far, and we knew nothing. We knew nothing about Harry Truman. As it turned out, he was a great man too. But in any event, we made the link up with the Russians at Torgau, T-O-R-G-A-U, Torgau on the Elbe River in Western Germany, Eastern Germany, I guess it is. And we were excited over linking with the Russians, and we found them to be a disreputable lot, I can say that. They didn't seem to know the infantry tactics as we knew them, but they were certainly great fighters. Very tenacious, very stick with it. And well, naturally, we were glad we made the link up with the Russians because we knew that the war in Europe would then be shortly over. I was then sent from Torgau in Germany to Namur, Belgium, on my way to Japan. And that sort of troubled me. I figured that I had fought through France, Belgium, and Germany, and the Germans hadn't gotten me. Now they were going to send me to Japan or to the Japanese trying to get me. And I was not too keen on that. But anyway, we were a little while in Namur, Belgium, and the war in Japan was over with, and everything was satisfactory. So I came home, met a wonderful girl, got married, and she has put up with me for 55 years. Sometimes says something about long-term marriage. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Mr. John Edwards was a member of the United States Army 8th Air Force. On his 24th mission in the bombing of Germany, Mr. Edwards was shot down and became a prisoner of war. He was finally liberated by the 14th Armored Division. That's the southern group, which you all very well know now, was led by George Patton. Mr. Edwards would go on to serve in Korea and Vietnam. Today, Colonel Edwards is the current president of the State Military Heritage Museum. Mr. Edwards.
Thank you very much. Good morning. What a beautiful day. For a former prisoner of war, every day is a beautiful day. Believe me. Yes, I was like my good friend over here, Herman. I was a teenager. I was 17 years old. I've been pestering my folks. I want to go and fly. I want to fly. I want to fly. No, my mother said, you're going to stay on. You're going to get through school. That's what you're going to do. Fine. Finally, she agreed. I left high school, graduated high school, and they signed me up. What a day. To this day, I will remember one thing that my mother said. Before you go into service, I want you to learn how to shave. I had little peach fuzz. I was trying to learn how to shave. So today, I still don't have much of a beard. But anyway, I remember that very, very distinctly. Yes, I went through all the training requirements and got crewed up, and you'll see some of that as a picture of my crew over here, on a B-24 Liberator bomber, one of the heavy bombers in World War II, 4-engine bomber. We were in England with the 445th Bomb Group, 703rd Bomb Squadron, and if you've read your history on all the air bomber squadrons and so forth, you'll know that the Jimmy Stewart, Major Stewart, was our squadron commander of the 703rd Bomb Squadron. We flew the usual missions. You were alerted the day before. You're going to be flying on the mission the next day, and you were awakened about 4 o'clock. What did you do? You went over to the chapel if you wanted to go to the chapel. Then you went on over to the mess hall. In the meantime, you try to find the crew chief. What's the bomb load? What's the fuel load? If it's a maximum, you know you got a long way to go. It's going to be a long distance bombing run to some German city. Well, finally, the 24th mission. How ironic. B-24, 24th mission, and it was the usual. You know, you didn't leave the airfield and went direct to your target. What you did was, as a crew, we were given an area of assignment. Each plane went up individually, and they met at a certain height, certain location, and you flew around and around. And then the whole formation bomb squadrons, the groups, all the others flew in one formation. You saw, I'm sure, pictures of these long formations of bombers going over to Europe. Well, we went on, and when it was about, I'd say probably around 9 o'clock and so forth in the morning, we went on. The target that we had was Spandau. This was outside of Berlin, Martian yards. Well, you know, we fly tight formations, and we try to avoid giving the information, the route it would take. You never went direct to the target because there were anti-aircraft formations in different locations in Germany that they would be firing at you. This one was the same, different angles that we went in. Finally got to Spandau. Not all of us had a chance to drop our bombs. We had an alternate target that was in Magdeburg. Our plane, the group, was hit by anti-aircraft. So we had to slow down. Then, unbeknownst to us, the little information that was given, the first German jet fighters that came in and hit our plane. One can hit the number 1 engine on the one side. What a sight! You know, you knew the enemy fighters, and you could track with your guns to get and try to get the fighter. But this was one. Wow, the speed of a jet plane is much faster than you see in the regular fighter planes. We had to bail out. The plane was losing fuel, altitude, and so forth. The word came on, bail out. We never had a practice jump before. We went out. You also learned that you would avoid pulling your ripcord immediately because your oxygen mask was off, oxygen wasn't available, your heating suit was off. So you were in lack of oxygen in the air. Over 10,000 feet, you had to put on the oxygen mask. And then you had the heating element, so we tried to look if we could see the ground below about 10,000 feet, and that's when you would pull your ripcord. You either had a chest pack or a backpack. I bailed out about, I thought, 10,000 feet. Clear, it was clear air. And descending down the Harz Mountains, snow on the ground, wintertime. What is going to happen? You know you're going to land in a tree, there were trees all over. So I came down and got my chute off. It wasn't a huge tree. Came down on the ground. I was a little teenage boy. I assumed he was a teenage boy. He's waving to me. I just got a few feet away, and then there was an individual civilian behind me, and I heard, "Oh!" That's what I felt. I was scared. He was in a loud voice like that. Came up to me and immediately asked, dog tag, I can speak German, dog tag and information and so forth. It wasn't but a moment later, I think, I don't know what it was, another civilian came up and was alongside the other one, pulled out a revolver, a pistol, or I don't know what small arm weapon that he had, and he fired at me and shot me right underneath. I think that flying suit that I had probably raised me from getting a serious injury in my knee. Well, I had to, I was signaled to get the parachute. I got the parachute, brought into town, and went through the some interrogation. Went in the town square. I was alone at the time. There I saw my pilot, 2 gunners, and for a moment there, we were standing there. A civilian came over, shot my pilot dead. Was I scared? I was shaking. I didn't know what's going to happen to me. I looked at the gunner. Immediately some guards came over and they took us away into a hilltop, I guess, observation post. Well, then I won't go on, make it short. I went through the interrogation, Air Force, went in and Dula Luft. This is Luft is an air camp, a German air camp. Went through all the camps, and then I went on over to southern Germany after 17-day force march, and was in Moosburg, Germany, with Patton's 14,000 Division, came through, liberated us, and let me tell you, when we were liberated, and our American flag came up, I'm sure there was a roar from that group of prisoners, thousands of us, that could be heard all the way back to America. That's what it meant for us. Again, in Allied hands. We saw some British later, because they were there also. So this is my sad experience, but I will remember to this day. It was one that just, am I using my right expression, scared the hell out of me. Thank you for listening to me.
Mr. Ernest Hotaling was a member of the United States Army Airborne Engineers. Mr. Hotaling was part of the Airborne Engineers, but it wasn't planes that he flew. He flew gliders. And this regiment had the important responsibility of setting up bridges and airstrips as the Allied forces marched through France toward Germany.
Good morning. Like Mr. Frank said, I was with the 878th Airborne Engineer. We used gliders, and our main flying ships, I call them ships, were C-46s and C-47s. They carried troops in these planes. Now, our job throughout France and all the way up through Germany, Belgium, all the way through, we put in possibly 5 different runways. What we would do, we would go in there with our equipment, straight down, and level off as much as we could of any big area of field. The reason for this was these 46s and 47s would come in with doctors, nurses, and equipment, medical supplies. They would then take off with doctors, nurses, and wounded. And by this way, we would get these wounded back to hospitals that were occupied. So different people have asked, did you get any medals? No, we didn't get no medals. We were there for the purpose of getting these wounded out. And the only medal that I did get was I met a gal in London, and I looked at her, beautiful redhead. In 2 days I was on pass, and before I left that day, I says, I'm going to marry you. And she laughed. But I went back to camp, and I started paperwork through the U.S. government. You had to, go through a lot of red tape. So finally, at the end of the war was ended 60 years ago today on May 6th. Anyway, I signed over to stay in so I could get this paperwork. It was still slow. This is over a year. But I kept writing back and forth. We wrote letters back and forth. So in 1945, September 3rd, we were married. And if you figure out 60 years. And what I got to say is that was the biggest medal that any GI could ever get. Thank you very much.
Mr. Stan Zemgulis might be one of the younger members of our distinguished panel. And in speaking to him, he indicated, I didn't fight in Europe, and I was actually inducted in the Army in 1944. And yet some of his stories of what he did, I thought was so important to have what is in someone's mind, as they've already seen the war going on for so many years, and now they're about to participate from his perspective in the invasion of Japan. Mr. Zemgulis was inducted into the Army in 1944. He was 18 years old. He had basic training in field artillery and combat engineering. In 1945, he left San Francisco, headed to the Philippines, where he and his fellow soldiers would begin the preparation for the invasion of Japan. On board the ship, he heard the news of today, the E-Day. While in the Philippines, Japan surrendered after the devastation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Shortly after that, Mr. Zemgulis was part of one of the earliest forces to reach northern Japan during the American occupation of the country. And he has some interesting stories that he shared, I hope he will, in terms of his experience there as an occupied force versus our experiences of our American forces in Iraq today. Perhaps as importantly, he's also known as Anisha's friend and family friend.
I think I'll do away with the microphone. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
As Mr. Frank said, I'm probably the youngest one because I got into the Army, was inducted in February of '44, went through the training, and then shipped out with an engineer depot company. Now, what is that? That's I happened to be a clerk at the time, so I say that's why they put me in there. But the engineer depot company is the low and home depot of the Army. In effect, we were to supply the Army itself with the construction equipment, materials, hammers, saws, nails, lumber, and then we also had another group that supplied the parts for the bulldozers and the graders that were used for engineering groups that did the work. It took us 30 days to go from San Francisco to Manila on a slow boat to China, a Liberty ship. And we were just 2 ships by ourselves and unescorted. And then that was when VE Day was declared. Then we knew that at least we didn't know where we were going. We were going for a Beach A Day. On Beach A Day, which was August 16th, 15th, August 15th of 1945, we knew we were ready to go, set out and go out. About a month later, we were put on a boat, shipped out to Japan. On the way up, well, in Manila itself, traffic was heavy. The Army and the Navy and everybody else were all based there. But it was the ruins of the buildings and everything else. The debris was all scattered. Roads were cleared, but there wasn't much reconstruction, if you want to call it that. But on the trip to northern Japan, Hokkaido, which is the northern island, 10 miles north of Honshu, we stopped at Amore, which was the northernmost town on the island of Honshu. And for some reason, they let us get off for a while and get some exercise off the boat. And the thing that impressed me there was, first of all, going into a country that we didn't know which was our enemy at one time. We went into town. The town was completely level, except for the Shinto temple that was there.
recycled. All the bricks were piled up, all the sheet metal was piled up in a separate pile. The streets were cleared, the building lots where the houses were all raked and clean. And it was quite a contrast coming from Manila, where everything was debris has still been scattered all over. Nothing pretty much done except for individual units. Well, then we were put back on the boat and went up to Hotaling. Now that's 10 miles north of Honshu, as I said before. And we were at Otaru, a little fishing village on the west shore, opposite Siberia. We took over 5 warehouses and put our supplies in and set up business there to supply our own troops so that they could get comfort and make their barracks and make their own conditions more livable. The thing that was interesting about Hokkaido is that I understand that it was like the frontier of Japan. Not much industry at all except for the fishing. And the thing that impressed me too was that it hadn't been damaged at all. Everything was there, all the buildings were there. You didn't see any ruins. But come November, it began to snow. And it snowed every day. November, December, January, March. 16 feet of snow during the season. Compare that to about 5 feet that we get here in Schenectady. And most of all, they didn't plow the streets. So you just kept packing the snow down, packing it down, and you dug down into the houses to get inside the houses. So, and that meant that between the towns, there wasn't any roads that were open. So the only transportation between the cities was by railroad. They kept the railroads open. And if you remember, Sapporo, which was only 18 miles away, was the Winter Olympics of 1972. And I guess because of all that snow, that was quite a place. I know in Otaru they had a big ski jump. I never saw anybody use it, but you can see that the sport was there. One thing about the people, too, was that quite a difference between Iraq and what we have here and what we experienced was when we went in, the people were courteous, cooperative. We hired them to help us with our chores at the warehouses and in our quarters. And you weren't afraid to go out at night. You go out by yourself, actually. And this was only a little town, about 35,000 people at the time. You could go to their Japanese theater, which was maybe not much bigger than this room, with a stage, and then, of course, no chairs. You sat on the floor on mats. And of course, the music was different, but at least it was something to do. But you were always walking in snow. And finally, I was sent back home in May of 1945. Instead of taking 30 days back by ship, I made it from Yokohama in 2 weeks aboard a Navy assault ship, personnel she carried. But the interesting part about that was that you only got 2 meals a day, and all the rest of the time you stepped in line waiting for the next meal because you had so many people on board. And the first thing I received when I got into Seattle was a carton of milk. And that tasted so good because that's the first real milk I had in the whole year, because otherwise we had powdered milk or canned goods and everything else. So tasting that real milk was one of the champagnes, like a champagne drink, actually, after coming from that trip. And then within a week aboard the train to support Dix, it was discharged. And that was an interesting article. My name beginning with a Z. Of course, they marched us in alphabetically, A to Z, the Z in the back. But when they started giving out the discharges, they started with the Z's and worked backwards. So I was one of the first ones to get my discharge. And that's my experience. Thank you.
Mr. Pacific Front. As a staff sergeant and squad leader, Mr. Burns was part of the reconnaissance team that landed on Iwo Jima a few days before the actual Marine invasion of the island, and he became one of the first men wounded in the American taking of the island. Mr. Burns.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for having us here today. This is what you look like at 60 or 70. Mr. Dennis has asked that we talk for 5 minutes, and I'll put my notes away. Recently, I received a book from a colonel who wrote a story on, or a recap of the operations that I was involved in during the war on the amphibious, the Marine amphibious reconnaissance operations. And last night, trouble with having a computer being a night owl, I made several pages of notes which I'll turn over now and explain to you what happened. It was just one incident. The time frame is February 1945, and Mr. Dennis mentioned that you had taken your examinations in World War II history. Did you cover the South and West Pacific? Yes? And Iwo Jima?
Yes.
Oh, good. So I won't have to recap that. You realize that the significance of it was located halfway between the Saipan Air Base and Tokyo, which was a bombing. Then they wanted to take it out so that the aircraft Iwo, under Japanese control, could come up and affect the bombers, and also it would be a base for fighter planes to go along and escort the bombers into Tokyo. So much for that. So as the war went on down in the Pacific, from the beginning, after the Pearl Harbor, we were pushed all the way back into the beginning, almost to Australia, and gradually worked our way up through Guinea, Solomon Islands, Guadalcanal, and Gilbert's, the Marianas, and Saipan, and so forth. And that's where we put the big bases to bomb Japan. Come the time to take out Iwo Jima, the generals and the admirals assigned a task to the 4th, 5th, and 3rd Division. I was a member of the 5th Division, and each division has a reconnaissance company, and from that they select a team of about 10 men who go in and look at the beaches before the actual operation. And this has been going on since the early days of the war. They started with the beach watchers from Australia, would come from the Solomon, and later on they would use submarines that put on shore in Gilbert's, and Pelham they'd use frogmen, which we turned out to be. And eventually, as they got further north, the United States controlled the seas more with new, larger ships. So our operation of the 4th and 5th recon teams of 10 men each were assigned to reconnoiter the landing beaches on Iwo Jima, Sabachiyama, the mountain, up 2,500 yards. And to do that, they assigned us a destroyer escort as a mothership. That's the same as the Slater that's over in the Hudson River in Albany. It's a fast ship, and it's has a lot of capacities for explosives, dark room, all the things we needed. So on with the timing of it. We left Guam, proceeded to Iwo Jima at 16. Circled the island. Strangely enough, we did not encounter any fire from the island, although it had been bombed and shelled heavily that day. But that was not the last. The next day, on February 17th, about 10:30, when the recon took place, we left a mothership. We got into landing crafts with rubber boats attached to them. And you've probably seen this in news reels and television. What happens is they dump you over the side, and then come back later and pick you up with a loop of rope, hook your arm, and put you back in. So that was the procedure. And as we left the, let's see if I can get this all right. Maybe you should read this book. He does it much
this time, let me thank Mr. Frank and my niece, Kelsey, for inviting me here and the rest of the veterans. I was 18 years old when I was taken into the Army at the 87th Infantry Division. After about a year or so, I attained the rank of Staff Sergeant, squad leader. I saw action at Metz, the southern part of France, which was then called the Common Pocket. On December 16th, the Germans invaded the Ardennes, which was the Battle of the Bulge. I was part of the Third Army at that time, and we were all transported on trucks going to the Battle of the Bulge. We got there on December 23rd. We immediately went into action trying to relieve the men in Bastogne. Finally, the weather broke for us because we started to get the Air Force involved. Of course, by that time, the Germans were in full retreat. Then on January 8th, as we were attacking a German position, one of my men in the middle of the field was crying for help. I rushed out to see what was wrong. As I bent over, I had a sharp pain in over my leg, in my heart. I was knocked back about 3 or 4 feet. To my amazement, the bullet ricocheted. I have here a toothbrush case, seared. It's a small Bible. The bullet ricocheted right through my arm, my right arm, and my neck. I tried dragging the individual back up because there was 10 inches of snow. I just couldn't do it. When I got back to our lines, they fixed me up and took me to a field hospital, operated on me. And after about a month or so, I was taken to a hospital just outside of Coventry. And I guess that's about it. Thank you.
We also had the privilege of Dr. Lawrence Cioffi, graduated early from St. Lawrence University to attend the officer training at the Naval Academy. Mr. Cioffi, according to the stories I would tell, actually failed his initial recruitment because it was determined that he was not tall enough. So through some creative stretching, he was finally accepted, fortunately for the benefit of the Navy and for our country. Mr. Cioffi was assigned to the aircraft carrier USS Hancock, and among his battles experiences was the Battle of Coral Sea, as well as coming into contact with kamikazes. Mr. Cioffi was also sent to the USS Missouri, where he was assigned to Admiral Nimmer's staff toward the end of the war. And perhaps most importantly, Dr. Cioffi is Kelsey's grandfather, and we appreciate you joining us here. As I told my students, I said that this weekend, my students have to do current events every week. I just love to do it. And I said this weekend we will have more current events to do about your experiences than at any other time in their life except 15 years from now when expect, as you were coming with Patton's army, that you would actually be there to rescue fellow American soldiers from a battle that maybe you didn't know was going to exist. So could I turn those questions to the two of you? And then I hope all of us will ask questions of everyone.
Well, I also fought in the Battle of the Bulge. I was not at Bastogne, but we fought in the Ardennes, and I can't recall the name of the cities now. I'm trying to grasp them back. But we didn't think that this was going to be a short war, because there were rumors went around my division, or my platoon, 32 guys, that within 3 days Hitler was going to do something that he hoped God and the world would forgive him for. And immediately we thought of gas, and there was a sudden searching for your gas mask. We didn't carry those, we could get out of carrying them because it was just some other thing that was in encumbrance to you. So that led us to believe that he was such a tenacious guy, and he would not get. And then the Battle of the Bulge came along, and I guess I thought, my Lord, it's true. They're going to fight. They're going to, and their theory was, I guess, in the Battle of the Bulge, to come down and isolate Brussels, and they would then have a port. Am I correct in that? Oh, okay. They would then have a port with which to bring stuff in to supply their own troops, and that would play havoc with Eisenhower. But General Patton came up, and the job they did in coming up to relieve those troops in Bastogne was absolutely amazing. And then the weather broke too, when they could finally get some aircraft over and drop supplies. Those soldiers that fought in the city of Bastogne fought with no food, no bullets, no nothing, no medical supplies, until the weather broke and the supplies could come in. And I don't know if that answers your...
Mr. Chavez?
Well, I really didn't give it much thought, because at the time there were already a number of divisions coming in, helping out. And we knew we had supremacy of the air, and that was a big thing. And the thing that we all thought about is it took them one heck of a time to try to take Bastogne. So consequently, we knew they were stopped, you might say. But as this gentleman said, the worst part of that I did in my fighting was the cold. We'd be in these foxholes, and in order to keep warm, we began putting 3 men in the foxhole. The fellow in the center would have the body heat of the 200 right, and every hour on the hour we switched. And to this day, I don't like cold weather.
No, you're not too much.
See, if I could add something else. As Mr. Cioffi brought out, the cold was absolutely unbearable. That was the coldest winter Germany had had. And unfortunately, they were giving it to us. And my soldiers went in there with no winter equipment. We had those old black overshoes with the buckles on them. And a sleeping bag was just a wool shell, nothing fancy like they have today. And if you weren't there, we took 2 blankets and sewed them up the sides with marlin cord. And we had to be careful to cut the bottom out of our sleeping bag, because we were getting overrun by the Germans. So you could pick it up like a skirt and run like heck to get away from the Germans. But it was, the cold weather was, and like Mr. George, I can't stand the cold today. It was unbearable. I don't know how we actually lay down in 6 inches or a foot of snow. Just lay down there and go to sleep. It was absolutely unbearable.
May I say one more thing? We lost more people by frostbite than
that liberated us in Lewisburg, Germany. And he was the one that, on the next day, he came out in a Jeep, but you can picture him coming out, and he told us that we should remain right there, that medical supplies would be coming in, they would be treated with all medical support, necessary food, and everything else that we were lacking. And so that was a godsend. When you talk about being cold, that was a period of time. But when we were prisoners, 17 days forced march, free, we had frozen feet, we had cold feet, frost. I did get frostbitten on my legs, on my feet, because where did we sleep? Outside. We had nothing in way of any medical support. And food, it was, I can appreciate what you all went through when it was cold, wet, snow. But except for sacrificing one's life, no one has suffered more than a prisoner of war. What did he get? He didn't get the support. In units, yes, you were out there fighting, but eventually in a short time you were pulled back and so. Did you want me to say?
At the end, I'm going to.
Okay.
Mr. Burns?
I hope I answered your question about General Pact.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have any of you guys ever gone back to Europe after the war?
Yep.
Can you tell me where?
Pardon me?
Can you tell me where you've been?
Well, I was captured at a little town in the Harz Mountains by the name of St. Andreasburg. And I returned 10 years, 15 years later to go back and visit that place. This was part of East Germany on a line. It was difficult, but I was able to get through. My wife was with me. And they didn't know anything about the incident. The people there who were not acknowledging, yes, we captured some Americans and what happened here and so forth. It was a town. I'd say I think it had a 1,000 population. It was that small. Then I've been stationed in Germany after that. But to that location, it was just once. But I was in my military career. I had a couple of tours in Germany as part of my tour assignments.
Mr. Harrington? You went back there.
Yeah, I went back to France, to Normandy, and saw the beaches that we had gone up through and whatnot. And I was in St. Mary-Cleese, and contrary to what you might think, the people in the Paris area aren't very friendly to the Americans. But the people around the coast, I think in the province of Normandy, and St. Mary-Cleese, which was the village that was first taken by American troops, they are very friendly. Yeah, I think you probably saw that picture where that parachute was, or who was it, Red Buttons was hanging from the parachute from the steeple. And they still hang a parachute from that steeple and that church as a reminder of that. But the thing we were constantly reminded of, my division did, or my company did liberate a prisoner of war camp. There were Australian prisoners in there, and there were some political prisoners, German prisoners. But you had to be careful what you fed them. We were giving them part of our D-bars, which was a hard chocolate bar. And our commanding officer told us, don't give them anything to eat, you'll kill them. Because they hadn't eaten in so long, and those chocolate bars were so high in nutrition and whatnot that you would actually kill them. But I got a letter from the German government. So I was in the infantry, we dug foxholes. And they wanted me to come back and fill in all those foxholes.
What kind of weapons did y'all use in your experience?
The weapon I had and all the bombers had the 50 caliber machine guns. And I have out here on display 50 caliber machine guns, and it was on a rack that would come in and bring it right in, feed it into the 50 caliber machine guns. Those are the ones we had on the aircraft. believe me, when they hit, they hit with power. I've seen some of our American prisoners of war on a forced march when our fighter planes came down at treetop level, didn't know who we were in the forced march, and they fired their machine guns, and when some of our prisoners were hit the body, and the body would hit the ground and bounce back. Another one would bounce against the tree, near the tree, was hit, and the bullets would just knock those bodies around. It was an awful experience. But those are the only ones that we have is a 50 caliber machine guns. And I have, as a matter of fact, some items there. By the way, that picture over there that you see, that's me. You're wondering who that picture you're looking at. That's when I was 17 years old, before I went over to England. And I have the bomb group there. I have my crew here, the B-24 crew. I do have, if you study the Geneva Conventions, rules of Geneva Convention, I have a book over there. And I'm always asked when I go to speak somewhere, people, I don't know how many of you have seen the Purple Heart. That's the Purple Heart, because I didn't see the Purple Heart. And I have that. And there's a few items that I think you'll find of interest. I don't know what you have in your test, but I'm sure. The group that I see here, no one is sleeping, no one's yawning that I could remember. Someone maybe quickly, but you are a most attentive group. You really, well, you've taken your test. So if you miss anything, I know you know. And good grades.
Anybody else like to talk about that?
Probably in your studies about how the Americans or Allies bombed like France, Germany, and the rooms, and a lot of people felt sorry for the Germans. Well, over in England, they sent bombers after bombers after bombers. And England, being an island with a lot of space to drop these bombs, they would sometimes wipe out a whole town with boom. So I wrote in a book, and I'd like to have each one of you read through that, and it tells you stories of how progress moved up through right up until the end of the war. But now, the English people, the population, took buzz bombs. They come over when the motor stopped, boom, and wherever they came down, that was it. It would take out a house, 2 houses, 3 houses. Now, my wife would tell you she was working in London, and she was on her way home, and the air raid started. This warden came out and said, "Young lady, you better get inside." So they went inside, and he made a cup of tea, which is the English version of the welcome. So after it quieted down, she took off, and all of a sudden, she's not maybe a block away. All of a sudden, a bomb comes down, took out the building that her and this warden was in, and that was it, or she wouldn't be here today. But what I'm saying is, don't feel sorry for the German population. They knew who this guy Hitler was, and they went along, oh yeah, man, we are super. But the English took an awful shellac before we went in there and liberated it. Okay?
Can I just add a counterpart to that?
Sure.
I was in England, I was in London, and the buzz bombs. side, in Germany, in Nuremberg. When the American bombers came over to bomb Nuremberg, we were in boxcars, but they were allowed us to run out of the boxcars out into the outside of Marshall Yard area. Nuremberg was bombed, terrible bomb. I still recall children crying, yelling. War is hell, if I may use that word, but human beings, and we shouldn't have wars. But on the other side, and I got also hit hard in the back, the anti-aircraft guns, when they would fire up there, the burst were great bursts, little pieces of that shrapnel would come down. And what we did was I put a head down like this to avoid our head being hit. We didn't have even a hat at that time. But to see children, old women, crying, fires, sirens, and so on, it's every side. And you think, and I changed somewhat of a feeling on a human side, and we should consider, if we ever go to war, to defend this country, yes, but to avoid wars at all times. We don't need wars, and we can't settle matters peaceably. We've got people, innocent people, children, that don't know and have no responsibility. And I just have to add that part. Thank you.
How do the civilians in the different countries treat you as you were invading? Like France and other countries, how do they differ their opinion when you came?
Well, when we went into France, they were very good to us. They were happy to see us, glad, because under the German occupation, they weren't doing too well. They didn't have enough food to eat. We went in. Well, we used to give them our rations. We gave them anything we could, but they were so very glad to be liberated. Belgians the same way. Very happy to see us, and the Germans would profess to say they were happy to see us. Now, I got mixed feelings about the German civilians. Anytime there was a death camp, and we went through one of them, you could smell that place before you got to it. Now, the Germans said they didn't know anything about it. I find that kind of hard to believe, because it was there. Yeah, as I say, if you were within a mile of it, you could smell it, you could see the smoke coming out of the smokestacks, and those were bodies that they were eliminating. They didn't want anybody. Something like 16 million people killed as a result of World War II. I don't know, something like 9 million Jews annihilated in the death camps they had there. How could a race of people do that and say they knew nothing about it? They had to know what was going on there.
Just one more. In the sense it was a happy occasion for me and my squad during Battle of the Bulge. We were taken off the line on December 24th, Christmas Eve. We were billeted in one of the homes that hadn't been destroyed. And the ironic part about it, we received our Red Cross packages. And in this home, there were 2 women and 4 children that lived upstairs, and my group was downstairs. You wanted to see these kids, and the women, what they wanted from my box of goodies, not the candy, not the cookies, 4 bars of soap. They wanted the soap. But they thanked us very much, and the kids, looking at those kids, with the trouble they were having their cookies and candy, and that was their Christmas Eve.
Mr. Burns, you have experience on Iwo Jima, and you knew that individuals with regard to the famous flag raising situation there, I believe. Yes? What about the experience that you had some of your individuals who were participating or with the flag raising at Iwo Jima, or had some stories about that?
Oh, yeah, I have a very personal story. It has nothing to do with the Marine Corps particularly, but the flag went up at 4 went up in the morning with them, took the first flag raising. Joe Rosenthal came up 2 hours later. My brother George took the second picture. Some of his negatives disappeared when they went to Saipan for processing. But anyway, in the book over here, which I loaned Mr. Dennis, there's a photograph of my brother and Rosenthal standing on the top of Sirvachiyama. We used to call it Sirvachiyama. Mount Sirvachi, that comes from Mount Yama, like Odiyama. But it shows the two of them standing on the top of the mountain. Did you want any clarification on the flag raising?
No, they have an article on it, but I want you to share your personal experience.
So, thank you. Yeah, I definitely like to get the word out because not too many people realize that my brother George was really at the original and the second flag raising.
Are there any other questions that anyone would like to?
What are your opinions on the bombing of Dresden, our capital of Germany? What are like your opinions? I heard you, Mr. Edwards, you said that you were the civilians being on them.
Well, let me say the experience of bombing. I was at Nuremberg, as I said. It was horrible. I don't care what it is. When you're a child, you don't know anything. You're not responsible. And some of the brothers, the grandmothers, the men, yes, they're all fighting and so forth. Getting back to Dresden, I have mixed emotions, the need for bombing of Dresden. For all intents and purposes, the war is over. The Russians came over, Americans showed up, and so forth. What was the reason really for bombing? Revenge? I don't know if it was really Churchill that was the one that pushed for the bombing of Dresden because of the bombing of Coventry in England and so forth. Maybe it was a revenge experience. But my feeling, on the other side that I was also in Korea, and I was one of the first troops to go over there. And then the North came down and were trying to push them ahead. Innocent children. They were pushed off the roads because we needed the roads to get by. We needed the civilians all on the side. This is awful. War, we shouldn't have war at all. We should negotiate. What are we over there fighting? And the lives that we had in Vietnam too. I was there as a battalion commander. My first loss was my operations officer, captain, was hit by a grenade. But I see these civilians out there trying to make a life, children and so forth. It's hard to believe. And then today we're faced with Iraq and the Iraqi revenge theory of terrorists and so forth. I have deep feelings. I have a family, I have grandchildren and so forth. I hate to see American life lost anywhere. Let's prevent that at all costs. Let's not have a war. We can do it. We have threats, yes, but I think we can prevent it. God bless our children. Remember that. I want God bless you, young people. You're the future of America. I'm an old man, yes, but I have still deep emotions. And I love you all for the smile I see up there. You're great, children. Thank you very much.
If my memory serves me, I think that Mr. Harrington, you might differ with the Dresden issue.
Well, I do, but I hate to do this publicly in front of John, who was a retired colonel. If I was discharged from the Army as a private. But I guess this is my chance to get even, vent all my frustrations. But as far as the bombing of Dresden is concerned, that was a war. We were involved in a war. Was it necessary? I don't know. They didn't consult me in running this war. Was the bombing of England, which was bombed, and the killing of women and children necessary? Because that's all they were sending the buzz bombs over there to do. There were no military people there. They were trying to kill civilians, women cliche. I don't know if you've read, you probably haven't read about it. It was a small city. They killed an SS officer. And the Germans, in their wisdom, annihilated this city. They killed everybody in that city. They bombed the city. They destroyed the city. There was no Ricochet anymore. They destroyed it right from the maps. Was that necessary? But it's war. War is it's a terrible thing. I'm concerned about the Americans that are killed over there too. And I liken it in Iraq. I liken the war in Iraq to the war in Europe. What was Prime Minister Chamberlain, was it, that came back from having a talk with Hitler, said we have peace in our day, and all the time he's waving that piece of paper around. Hitler's going into Czechoslovakia, he's going into Austria, raising havoc in those countries. I wonder, I don't know if this is true, I wonder if had we fought the war, had we fought Hitler then, at that point in time, there may not have been a World War II. And maybe because of our, I'm getting philosophical, I'm not a philosophical person, I'm more of a direct person. But the war in Iraq, I liken that to a preventive measure to preventing World War III. And there are unique situations going on over there, and I don't intend to get into them, I don't know that much about them. Everybody, their pet dog has got an atom bomb over there. And I think we're doing the right thing. I hope there's some, was it 1,200 Americans got killed so far? That's a terrible thing. But there were something like 6,000 killed in World War II. So if we can prevent big war, kind of silly, maybe it's best to have a small war. I don't know if I'm making any sense or not. Thanks for listening to me.
I want to thank you very much. I know that the students would like to spend some time visiting with you personally and showing that, but they also would like to share something with you. So give me 1 second, because Barry's back here. So. seat, guys. One final thing. You might recognize Mr. Edwards because he was the Grand Marshal of Niski Day last year?
2 years.
2 years ago. And Mr. Edwards, I want to take a minute just to share something that he has shared with previous students, and then I'll give you the opportunity. So, it'll be very short. I know you want to get in touch with him.
Thank you. You know my experience with the POW. Questions come up often. What it was like to be a POW? What do I recall as a POW? And I refer to the 4 F's. I know you all passed. You're not getting any F's, I'm sure. But what are the 4 F's that I want to leave with you? One is faith. When I was taken prisoner and shaken, I prayed to God. I was alone. I didn't know what's going to happen. Faith in God, and we prayed. We always prayed. And I'll have to admit, to this very day, I pray that I'm a survivor. Along with faith, we as prisoners of war had faith in our country, that they would do everything possible to liberate us, to get us free. Family. You know, we were at the base in different activities and so forth. Never thought you'd send a letter once in a while, but then you thought about family. What's my mom, my dad, sisters, my brother, what's happening there? And it was true with all of us. Food. We never got enough food. A lot of us lost weight. It was especially horrifying when we were on a forced march and burning up a lot of energy, very little food. What did we depend on? The International Committee of the Red Cross and those big white trucks with a Red Cross on there would come through there and they would bring in supplemental food that would be offset for us to sustain us. Food. We take it for granted, but food is the most important. Those are 3 F's. What's the 4th one? Freedom. Freedom. When you were a prisoner of war, you lost all your freedom. You couldn't do anything. You're at the mercy of the enemy, whatever they cared to do. You didn't know whether you would be alive. You know, towards the end of the war, Hitler had an order out that all the airmen would be executed. What wasn't carried out? We're fortunate again, survived. Freedom. And I have to repeat again. I recall when General Patton came into our camp and the tanks rolled through the gates. And then moments later, that flag, that flag, that flag, that flag was flying again. Believe me, when you lose your freedom, it's an awful experience. And I will say, I've traveled around the world. This is the best country in the world. We have our freedom. We have our differences and so forth. But we have our freedom. And when America's ever attacked, let's defend America because there was no better country. And I'm speaking from personal experience. God bless America. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like you to feel free now to come and visit. There's a lot of things that our guests have had and brought. Some of you, by the way, have brought some things. Aaron, I have your letter right here. And I know that you'd like to share some of the stuff with the veterans as well. So you're also feel free to stay as long as you'd like for your lunch or come back because we'll be here for a while. So again, I thank all of you very much. We really appreciate it.
Mr. Frank. I like America.